Yes, and this is Let's Talk, call-in radio. The show on which the listener's voice is the most important thing. We want to hear from you. You don't want to listen to us. We want to hear from you. Because your voice matters. It's a on-air community forum. No one will recognize your voice, and we're going to ask your name, but you can give us any name you like, of course. So please call during the show 415-663-8492, or you can tweet us. I have the tweet box in front of me. Tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR. So 415-663-8492. And today we're joined in the studio by one of our most faithful listeners, the wonderful MK. How are you, MK?
I'm well enough.
Oh, I'd better pot you up, as they say in the trade. There you go. Hello,
MK.
And
how
Charles
am
is
I?
here too. How are you?
I'm well.
Oh, excellent.
And good.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. This is Let's Talk Call-in Radio, 663-8492. And what is our topic for today?
The topic for today is political correctness. Yes. It's a wonderful thing that's kind of been, that term has been co-opted by right-wingers to dismiss a lot of conversation about many different things. And to, especially in academia, it's been used to whip up support for what? It's to whip up opposition to the destruction of young people's minds by liberal academics.
Well, I think it's important to remember, and I'll try and keep the history to a minimum. God knows we don't want to know where we come from or why. But the political correctness as a term actually came out of left movements early in the century, because Marxists, some of them believed that Marxism was a science of politics. And so this is not a matter for debate. And people who deviated in the minds of certain Marxists were politically incorrect, and that could be scientifically shown or determined.
Right. Last century.
Early in this century. Oh, no, wait. You're right. It's the 21st century now. Yes, that was early in the last century. And it's a term that came from the left, but it is, I think, it functions the same way today in the sense that if you can perfect the language, then you could perfect society. It's a little bit like the continual frustration of the architect. The architect believes that if you could make the perfect building, you could create the perfect man or woman. Unfortunately, there's the built environment, and so you think about language as the built environment, and the architect is endlessly frustrated. So, Sim Vanderen, please call in. 663-8492. Any other frustrated architects?
But the argument is that our language shapes our behavior to some extent, right? And that if you have offensive language, that you will behave in an offensive way without even thinking about it.
That's right.
Isn't that what we're guarding against when we?
Well, that aggression in the language will lead to, or is the root cause of actual violence. Right. I think that's kind of dangerously incomplete. I don't think that's right. But because I think that there's a very sharp distinction between violence and violence in language. But people like Jacques Derrida and a lot of his sort of set in the late 60s were making this claim that categorization means exclusion. And so, and exclusion is violence. Exclusion is essentially fascism, the rejection of other meanings. And so we need to create a language that doesn't cause this kind of exclusion.
By excluding words from the language.
It's perverse.
How ironic.
It is very ironic, I would say so. But anyway, MK, what are your feelings about political correctness?
I think there's an effort to stifle. I think stifle's a good word to use with political correctness. Because if you buy into it and are so super careful not to offend anybody, you're going to not say a whole lot.
and indeed, people don't talk very much. I mean, there is a kind of silence.
Because everybody's like this.
Oh, yeah, with the phones. That's not a very good gesture for radio. Actually, any gesture is not a very good gesture for radio. But
now they know.
What you mean is people are constantly engaged with screens. For instance, I have one in front of me, but you were saying that like smartphones, right? They're all looking at those.
Well, yeah, political correctness. So it's we're trying to be kind to everyone, right? We're trying not to offend anyone, basically, and there have been great movements. The human rights movement, when that came, when that surged to the forefront in the 60s and 70s. The N-word, for example, is the classic example, is that it's so imbued with meaning, with terrible history, with the slavery and all that, that white people saying that word is a terrible thing, and I don't know of anyone who actually says it now.
I hear on a rare occasion, very rare occasion for West Moran, we discuss this in the car, they shall remain nameless, the people I hear. But, we really pretty much reject that now. It's a pretty rare thing to hear anybody say, and I'll just do it once for the record, to use the word nigger in the conversation. That's not disallowed, not yet anyway.
No, it's not on the list.
It's not yet.
But yeah, exactly, and it was the title of, what's his name, Dick Gregory's autobiography. So okay. And it's been reclaimed, as have other words like slut. Calling a woman a slut. They went through this doing the slut walk, which we thought was a great thing. Yes, I'm a slut. Well, yeah, don't on me.
Oh, I see. And see how he has to mask it with the presence of this woman.
Of course. May her memory live on. But they've reclaimed it, and somebody described it as rehumanizing. Oh, that's right. Yesterday I listened to KQED yesterday, but I was out of range of KWMR. I was in the car and listening to Fresh Air, and there was a lexicographer from Merriam-Webster talking about language, and she described how words can, like that, a dehumanizing word like that, was rehumanized. She said they're rehumanizing the word because blacks can still use that word. They use it as a term of friendship and humor and all that sort of stuff. So it's like slut is the only other example I can think of right now where it was reclaimed by women and they said, "Oh, you want to call me a slut? Okay, I'm a slut." Okay.
I guess. I mean, I think the problem that develops out of this is that the language is supposed to carry all the weight of our politics, and it really can't. And so, you can reclaim a word that isn't an answer to poverty or inequality or whatever. You can have the word and not have the word. It doesn't change endemic urban poverty. It doesn't change people's attitudes towards women.
Of course not.
And actually, I would go, this is a word I don't think I could be, reference to a woman. Can I use that word on the air? Female dog?
The B word.
The B word. How is anybody going to know what we're talking about?
Well, this is what this show is about.
You can? Okay, I've just been informed from a higher power, although we have the actual boss here in the studio with us, that you can say the word bitch on the radio. So I had a girlfriend that I was using this term all the time, and she said to me, Are you really going to keep saying that word in reference to women or reference to anything? And so I sort of stopped using it because it was offensive to her, and I thought, well, why am I using that word all the time? And so I very infrequently use the term bitch any longer. But
can't you say nasty woman?
I do frequently. Yes,
she's a nasty woman.
It's become very chic.
Yes, indeed.
Presidential almost.
So near and yet so far.
663-8492. Please call us.
Please do call in. This show is all about you, listeners, calling in and telling us what you think. What are your opinions on political correctness? Right, wrong? Is it a good? I mean, does language change how we act and think? I think it's a good sign. See, this is the thing, that when someone objected to it, you thought about the words that you were using and you realized you were causing offense to at least one person.
Right, and this was somebody who didn't want to reclaim the word bitch, who was actually sort of offended about how casually I used it. And so I went, oh, well, I'm not going to use that word anymore. And it worked. And I would say all of the women out there, you need to help reform these men. You need to use your power for the good.
And how can they not?
But and as I say, not reclaiming, not I'm proud to be a bitch or I'm proud to be a slut, but like, we don't need to use those terms.
Well, it's different ways of doing it. And I think with the
it's always so sexual. I mean, that's the connotation, and that's a real put down.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that is how men operate, It's terrible.
Bless your little hearts.
Just if the heart is little, that's fine, but I'm not worried about that part of my anatomy. But no, I mean, we found our real topic. What's wrong with men? And political correctness.
Oh, call in, indeed.
Do we need them? Murray Seward, another long-time listener of the show, sent an email. I favor as much freedom of expression as possible without it leading to violence. I remember when Lenny Bruce was arrested for something he said during a routine, he shouted out, "I didn't do it, I only said it." I've known religious Jews who will not write G-O-D. Instead, they write G-D because they think God will be offended. And he got yelled at for saying that was kind of weird. Had a debate with David Mitchell, who used to be the editor of The Point Raised Light, about bad words that a politician had used, but David wouldn't print the words in the Light. That squeamishness bothered Murray, and he said so in a letter, and anyway, it went to the letter column. This isn't merely about Carlin's 7 words. These are the 7 words we are not allowed to say on the air because, yes, very nasty. It's about accepting language even if doing so causes some anxiety. Murray always loved Dick Gregory's decision to title his autobiography Nigger. That was a profiling courage. There was a man who understood language. Finally, when I was a student at Brandeis, a Jewish-founded university back in the 60s, one of the newspaper's editors did an interview with the head of the American Nazi Party, George Rockwell, and published it in the school paper to the outrage of many students and donors. Most of them didn't want to read what he said. Murray did, but he wouldn't have forced anyone to read the piece. That's the beauty of the system. We have the freedom to turn the page, shut off the radio, find other friends if we don't like what's said. Am I conservative for taking this position? I don't believe so. I have a friend way to the right of President Trump. She favors censorship not only in language, but even in the ways people dress.
Oh, good grief.
There you are. So the very people who have co-opted this term political correctness and turn it against every argument, every regulation that has to do with minorities or women or women's health or anything, it's just political correctness, shut down that argument. They're also the ones who want to take books out of libraries. They also won't have George Orwell anymore or something. There is much in favor of politically correct censorship as liberals are.
Counting on people being able to self-censor.
Right.
And that's
the market.
Okay, unless you're mad.
It's like the force of the market on your speech.
Max Horkheimer, who was part of what's called the Frankfurt School, he was a professor at UCLA back in the 50s and 60s, and he said he would watch his students do this. At first, they would learn what it was not allowed to say, but he said then the process became internal, where people ultimately would not think what they were not allowed to say. Right? They wouldn't even allow the thought to occur in their mind, and he thought that this was being terribly destructive. I mean, a classic point about free speech, and I hope somebody would call in and challenge us at 663-8492, is that free speech is about the speech that you abhor. It's about the opinions that you hate, that come from the people that you hate.
Yes.
That's the purpose of defending it. And again, this idea that you could create some kind of political or social perfection through controlling what people are allowed to say and not allowed to say, I think is very dangerous because thought and politics is about disagreement, and it's about the confrontation that happens in language, the theater that happens in
discourse.
language.
In social discourse, political discourse, all has to do with opposing viewpoints. Otherwise, what would be the point in talking?
Well, I mean, and that's what I had got tattooed recently. I live in West Marin. What would be the point in talking?
Stop it.
And we have a call?
Oh, we do. Well, good heavens. Well, talk among yourselves for a moment.
Oh, yes. MK. Well, you're looking lovely today. Are you down from Seattle?
I am.
I see.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Oh, caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please? Keep it clean, please.
My name is Elvira K. Bitch.
Elvira K. Bitch.
That was my girlfriend at the time who said, please stop using that word. Actually, Elvira, it's wonderful to hear your voice again, I got to say.
She had a problem with her dad.
She's a lawyer in San Francisco. You're still in San Francisco, aren't you?
No, I'm in the outer reaches of Coalinga.
Ah, Coalinga, beautiful Central California, I believe.
Indeed.
Caller.
Not that kind of word.
Oh, hello, everyone. This is a very complex topic you're tackling.
We are not afraid.
You are fearless. Let's Talk is a fearless show. I think I have so many thoughts about this that I'm pretty much drowning in them, so I'm not sure if I can be coherent. But I think that political correctness is just a way of using words as weapons. But this is a very old tradition in our culture. It's called propaganda. And in all cultures where there's, avarice and warfare and control, attempted control. So I have worked in a place of employment that was exceedingly politically correct. And it was a little unnerving, but at the same time, I think it can also be engendering a little bit of creativity and opening your mind as to how you think and how you use language.
Mm-hmm.
So there are pros and cons, obviously. The right-wing approach to political correctness is, of course, I find highly suspect. And I did read that UC Berkeley canceled a scheduled speech by Ann Coulter.
Mm-hmm.
So this is probably going to cause some sort of problem. I mean, it really does get all mixed up with free speech, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what Charles's point just now was when you ban people whose views you don't like from a university, especially, my goodness, especially Berkeley, then what are you fighting for when you're in the free speech movement? What does that mean?
It means Louis Farrakhan's a great example. He was somebody who most of us would find his views pretty ugly, but he was banned from college campuses in the 70s and 80s, mm-hmm. and so his ideas thrive. I mean, the thought you need to debate the person you loathe. You need to expose their ideas. You want them on the stage. You want them to be vigorously debated, but you don't want them removed from the scene because it just festers in the culture. And so Louis Farrakhan, has his movement to this day. Mm-hmm. Excellent calypso musician, I must say. Anyway.
Well, it seems to me that there's an exaltation of the unremarkable and the rube in our culture. Now, that was really politically incorrect.
I'd say so.
Deplorable, you mean?
No, rube.
I don't know about deplorable. That's a stronger word. I just think a person who's more sheltered or has views that might be less expansive or then see, I'm getting all bound up in my political correctness.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what happens. So you're called an elitist if you're too, quote unquote, educated, right? You're an elitist. So the problem is there's this elevating of mediocrity. And so you get someone who is at this point running the entire country who's illiterate. The dude's illiterate. And so people that back him who are on, radio shows and, talk radio and the more...
all the performance artists.
Yeah, these people who are really kind of radically more right-wing, they just... I don't know, they just don't seem bright enough to give the proper amount of... they're just not bright enough. And so what they're spewing is not credible. And so if you try to challenge the credibility, then you're saying that we're being politically correct. I mean, it's all a game.
And it shuts down the conversation, the discussion completely, because the inference is that it's all just a political ploy, that you don't really believe it, and that it's that's all it is. It doesn't mean that you actually want to see equality. You're just saying the right words. And in the 90s, the right-wing guys who were being funded by the think tanks that were starting up then were definitely driving a wedge between so-called liberal elite and ordinary people, right? I mean, the common folk.
Well, I mean, language does have a lot of power, and people can become unglued if you get into complex conversations, because those conversations have the power to shake up the way that we see the world. So it is kind of recognition of the power of language. But I would say that the left, quote-unquote left, what I really mean is what we call liberals in America, are just as guilty of this. So we need to get into these kinds of complex conversations. Liberals don't do it either, because nobody wants to have their worldview and their self-conception so radically unsettled. And so we don't get into deep conversations almost at all. I mean, me and Paul Rafel do, but he just, agrees with me.
We just insult each other.
No, he continually agrees with me, and at the end he says, Charles, you were right about everything. I've been a fool. It's, happens.
He's a placater, yeah.
A play dater?
No, a placater.
Play dates where he placates.
Maybe that is your experience, Elvira, not my experience. I think he deliberately disagrees with me to be bloody-minded, which you can still say.
Being challenged and having lively discussion, and also being very self-aware with how you use language. These are all, things that require, a more, first of all, you can't be too terribly insecure. You're going to feel very threatened right off the bat, and then that's when people start throwing around really politically incorrect terminology and just out and out insults. So I think at the core of this, in terms of human nature, is to not take things personally, because it is, like you say, when you have deep conversations, which are hard to come by, the art of argument.
Right.
It's just
is to discuss things without introducing racial slurs. For example, if someone said a racial slur against you, Elvira. You're from Carpathian Mountains, of course.
They're quite beautiful. I'm of Romanian descent as well. So.
And, what if someone made an ethnic slur against you? You would object to that. And you would object to the unconsciousness of the person's use of language in front of you. Or he or she is trying, see, I did it. He or she.
Yeah, it's really hard not to take that personally when someone does that.
And that's So that was really the impetus for what the conservatives call political correctness, is trying to be inclusive of everyone, not using exclusive language, and making sure that you're not including sort of racial slurs or epithets in your language that are hurtful to others. There's a thin line between that and being too sensitive about everyone's feelings with whom you're engaged,
I think you can find in a conversation, is somebody curious? Do they want to know? Do they want to know something about you or not? Or is language, again, just this performance it's used to inflame or to deflect? I mean, mostly language is used just to deflect out here in Westminster. You just agree to the pieties. I ran into somebody in the health profession out here, and I said, they're going after Obamacare. He says, yeah, it's terrible. But, I heard there were all these, problems with Obamacare. He said, yeah, Obamacare's a mess. I was like, well, wait, what is it? Well, his first, this is his profession. This is the world he works in, he or she, was to repeat the piety. Isn't it terrible that they're talking about getting rid of Obamacare, doing something else? And then his second reaction was, and I asked him a further question. He said, there are all these problems.
It's a real mess.
It is terrible.
Yeah.
Both those things are true.
Both of those things are true, yes. One is not exclusive of the other.
No, and that's a fair point. I agree. MK,
like democracy is messy, but we still try.
I don't agree that Obamacare is terrible. I just think that the way we have to argue things is exhausting, and people quit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think they think there's a point. And this is a terrible problem in our culture, is that we see it's a fatalism in the culture. Everything that's happening is happening because it must happen. And those things that aren't happening could not possibly happen. So what's the point of a conversation? The world is just as it is. Why would you argue about it? You know, the things that you say we could do differently, well, if they could be done, they would be done. And since they're not being done, then they're impossible. So, you know, what do you want to do for lunch?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to go to the beach? You know. But the citizenship, the concept of citizenship, and obviously it was an evolving concept. It, did not initially include anything but, the landed or propertied class of men. White men, you can throw in if you like.
Sure.
Was that this would be the common basis on which we discuss. That all of these other characteristics are secondary to our self as citizen. And so in that way, there's an equality that would be the basis for a conversation. And the pernicious aspect of political correctness would be to say that before you're a citizen, you are all of these ascriptive identities. Yeah. And that's true too. I mean, it does have power. People's quality of biological qualities or identitarian qualities, whatever, are very important to them, no doubt. But I mean, this is what I think citizenship and the concept of citizenship is trying to interrupt. It's saying we can have a conversation about, say, how resources are allocated, or how is it that we, house or heat or feed or whatever ourselves, right? And we can have this debate about it. And again, the politically correct conversation interrupts it. Says we first need to talk about how I, Charles, am oppressing other people as a white man, or how highly I regard my opinion as a white man or as a
right. Well, speaking as a tall, healthy, fairly good. Well, you're trying to destroy your health, but
we still smoke in the studio. Is it the 60s?
And tall and handsome and white man,
flower of his generation.
Of course, you would have that viewpoint because that was who made up all this stuff. That's who designed our English language.
But no, that's what the suffragettes were demanding. But that was their point, was saying that thing you have, we want it too. We want the vote. And people were willing to fight and die for that. And it shouldn't be disregarded. So, yeah, that's true. It was originally my unique property, and it would be a better world, yes, if I was in charge still. But
Charles in charge.
Indeed. It's only a television show. It never actually happens. But, in reality, this is why the civil rights movement happened, women's rights movement happened. They're saying they want to be a part of these conversations.
They want to be a part of the conversation.
That's right.
They want to be a part. They want to be citizens.
That's right. And so, but then
with all that includes.
But then you have the burden of freedom, which is that you have to make your argument and make it compelling. Well, you can't do that if everyone has to first identify themselves. So I see at lectures. I listen to a lot of lectures, through the day, and at universities, people come up to the microphone to ask questions of an academic, and they first say, this was actually in Seattle, or at the University of Washington anyway. It was, I am a white cisgendered male, and then they ask their question. And I think that demand, and this certainly happened, in the 60s, that demand that you first identify yourself with these qualities, and then you can make a statement. Is pernicious in the sense that. But
what was the discussion about? It must have been about
it was about gender and sexuality.
So he was just identifying himself.
They all do
saying,
context.
I'm a straight guy.
Got to be context, and the biggest way to undermine language is to throw out quotes or whatever or examples without applying context, and it's sort of a well-known ploy.
Well, I agree.
So I want to leave this conversation or let someone else call in, but I wonder, Charles, you'll probably scoff at this, but what do you all think of nonviolent communication and how it can fit into this bigger topic?
What do you mean by nonviolent communication?
Well, there's literally. There are classes. There's a school of learning to communicate in a nonviolent way. It's a sort of offshoot, probably, of psychological approach to being able to communicate with people without being threatening or not engendering a sort of shutdown in the other person or people whom you are addressing. And I have not taken courses in this, but I know people who have. And I'm wondering if you think, well...
Has it helped them?
The one woman that I have kept in contact with, who she was already thusly inclined, but I don't know.
Does that work if only one of the people's taken the class?
Yeah, right, exactly.
What I would say to that,
okay.
Elvira K. Bitch is our caller right now, and I do encourage people to call 6.
I'm leaving.
Oh.
I want to open the phone line, and then you can re-ID your show and give out the phone number very slowly.
Thank you so much.
And underwriters. Oh, look at that. Another call.
Ah.
Okay,
well,
thanks.
Thank you, Elvira.
Elvira. What was it? And caller, you are in the system, but I just have to do station ID here. This is KWMR 90.5 Point Reyes Station, 89.9 Bolinas, 92.3 in San Geronimo Valley. Let's see, we have road info. Bolinas Fairfax Road is closed until further notice between Shoreline Highway and Ridgecrest due to a tree down. Yes, there's a tree down on the Bolinas Fairfax Road, so it is closed between Shoreline Highway and Ridgecrest.
And support for KWMR is provided by the Point Reyes Light, an independent, locally owned newspaper telling West Marin stories since 1948, featuring award-winning reporting, essays, opinions, a community events calendar, and the sheriff's calls. Office and newsroom open Monday through Thursday in downtown Inverness. Subscription, classifieds, calendar, and advertising information, plus letter to the editor forms are available at ptreyslight.com. That's PTREYES light.com, or at 415-669-1200. And programming is also supported by the Maritime Radio Historical Society, working to preserve West Marin's rich radio heritage. The nation's last working Morse code coast station is in action every Saturday from 12 to 4 p.m. at the RCA receiver site, 17400 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, just past G Ranch on the Point Reyes Peninsula. Information at 415-663-8982 or online at radiomarine.org. That's marine.org. And finally, support is provided by the College of Marin, offering 62 associate's degrees and 54 certificate programs to prepare for in-demand Bay Area careers, as well as new degrees for students wanting to transfer to a UC or state university. Financial aid and tutoring available. Summer classes start June 12th, and fall classes start August 21st. Registration online at marin.edu.
Well done. Let's all take a breath. And now, caller, you are on the air. If you're still there, what's your name, please?
Hello,
Keep it clean.
It's Mia.
Mia.
From locally. This is a great topic, and I think obviously timely topic. And I just was thinking, we were running a show here on KWMR a few weeks ago. Maybe it was the Caroline Casey interview, and she used the phrase "the crutch of righteous disappointment," and I kind of liked that. And I feel like that's kind of thrown around a lot, but I think that especially with the internet, people are getting really lazy, and I really think it's so much easier to be negative than positive in terms of how much work it takes. And so I really do think that a lot of us have fallen into, I think that being negative is the easy route. In a lot of times, I mean, obviously it's necessary because we do need to call out like injustices, and we need to stand up for, people who don't have a voice that says, prevalent or whatever it is. But I do think that people have gotten lazy, especially with the internet, and just having these sort of like temporary outrages about things that I kind of almost think is like trendy. It's like, oh, this is so horrible, and then people forget about it.
Right.
So that's one thing I think, I don't think it's necessarily bad, because I think it's good that we're calling out things that have not been called out before, but I do sort of think it's getting to be more superficial in a certain way, because there's so many topics to deal with that like no one's really delving in very deeply. They're just kind of like, this is horrible. Oh,
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think you're right, but I would say that we have to apply that to ourselves. So it's easy to say, I don't want Donald Trump. Everybody knows what they don't want. That's very simple. When you start talking about what kind of world do you want to live in, and how do we make that happen, that is a long and often boring conversation.
Yeah.
So I try and do that professionally, but very difficult to get people to to engage in those
sit
kind
still.
of well, to sit still, absolutely. Yeah. And you know, the thing is a part of our culture too. Everybody's working all the time to pay all of these bills and all of these interest payments they're making all the time. They're exhausted at the end of the day, and they, you know, go home and whatever, just try and relax and, you know, get ready to go and do it again. And they dedicate their weekends to play dates, and that's really important to them, which is just another distraction. And the kinds of conversations that occur in those kinds of play dates are often, you know, very superficial because, again, it's supposed to be relieving all of this tension that has built up in our lifestyles, the way that we live and the way that we survive. So the time for a deeper conversation about what we want rather than what we don't want, who's got it? I mean, I see this in West Marin. I see this with wealthy people who live sort of plush lifestyles in West Marin, right? They fill up their time and have this kind of work of leisure, as Schumacher called it, a book that's much possessed in West Marin but not often read, called Small is Beautiful. I rarely see the binding of that paperback broken where I go. So, you know...
I have a dog-eared copy.
I totally agree with you, Mia, and, you know, what are you doing this afternoon? We can go to the station house and Paul, have lunch, and...
I'm not saying, you know, I would say...
You're not saying you.
Saying, like, I think there's, like, two ways. You could be sort of superficially negative or superficially positive or deeply negative or deeply positive. You know what I mean? And I think there's, like, definitely different options, but I think a lot of us are increasingly falling into the superficially negative category, and I don't really think that gets us anywhere. Like, sometimes I just say, hey, if I'm going to not take the time to really get deep with it, I would rather focus on the positive, which I understand is another problem in itself. But I don't know, it's just you know, something to think about.
Think about, I mean, if Hillary had won the election, everybody in West Marin would have gone back to sleep. It would have been me and Norman Solomon occasionally exchanging emails. That's what politics would have amounted to here.
Yep.
So thank goodness for Donald Trump. Let's all stand in praise of Trump right now because people are actually talking about it. But I agree with you, a lot of it's superficial. These people just simply would not have cared if people aren't opposed to fake news. They want the right kind of fake news. Obama was the right kind of fake news. Donald Trump's the wrong kind of fake news. Not that they want the truth. No, the truth is unsettling. And that goes back to what I say about language. Language can be unsettling. Deep conversation about, you know, how we can conceive of ourselves and how we relate with the world can really unglue somebody. And so it's dangerous, and so we don't want it. Right?
Well, so that's the point about Mia's point about being negative or positive, you know, and Elvira's point about...
Give her her full name, please.
Elvira K. Bitch's point about... consciousness of language, right? I mean, the consciousness and what is called political correctness is that effort to be conscious of one's language. Nonviolent communication was the thing. Is consciousness of the words that you use because, as you say, words are powerful and words can hurt, words can encourage. MK.
Yeah. Well, I can let you guys go.
Well, thank you.
I guess one more thing. I know you asked me to call, so I'm like, now I'm being a busybody here. But there's one other thing I wanted to mention. I think we've kind of lost a sense of subtlety, too. And I think we're so politically correct that we do miss out on intent a lot more. So I just wanted to put that out there. I mean, I think it's really important, again, to stand up for injustices. But I think the lack of focus on intent and what people are saying and the context, especially with the internet, with the clips everywhere, as Sally was saying, or Elvira, sorry.
Elvira, that's right.
I think it's getting increasingly outrage and without the bigger picture around it. So yeah.
True.
Cool. Okay. Thanks for having me on.
Thank
Great
you,
topic.
Thank you, Mia.
Bye.
You were going to say, MK?
Yeah, everybody has their own truth. However fleeting,
Oh, dear.
however fleeting it may be, is what Mia was saying. Is you hear something, you go, oh God, that's really, blah, 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 and then go have lunch or play tennis or whatever, and then it's truth is so hard to define. I mean, how do you? I don't believe anything.
Well, I mean, this is a problem in the culture, right? I mean, there is this subjective reality, and we see what we want to believe, I think is what you're saying, and people have this set of prejudices, and that's through which they see or do not see.
And we're getting hit right between the eyes with a lot of stuff now.
But I think the problem with that is there is a fact of the matter, and there is something that can be known. There is a truth. It's just sometimes it can be unavailable or difficult to know. And we can't be bothered to take the time.
Oscar Wilde said truth is often, what was it? Oh, damn, I can't remember. Oh, darn, I can't. I can say damn.
You can
Oh,
say
you can say
damn.
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 I'll think of it.
Come back to the Oscar Wilde quote
I
from
will.
MK. But okay, so this is the problem with nonviolent.
The truth is never pure but often simple, I think is what he said.
Something like
that.
It is. And, Wilde would be a great example of this. He's this brilliant satirist. He saw the society and the culture he lived in so clearly and had such a tremendous humor in being able to describe all of its faults. But Wilde would certainly not be somebody who would say, well, this is the concept, the problem of relativism in language and culture is that, well, that's your opinion, man. I don't think Wilde really would have gone for that's your opinion, man. Everybody just has their own truth. Because what that would lead you to a world in which the aristocracy in England in the 1880s was not ridiculous. That's just Wilde's opinion. Well, I don't receive it that way at all. I mean, you read it, the brilliance of his satire, you think this is not somebody who's thinks that the truth is relative or inaccessible.
And you could say, thank goodness for the royalty of the 1880s.
Yeah, well, you
spurred him on. This is KWMR. This is Let's Talk, and we want to hear from our listeners. We know you're listening out there. Come on now. What are your opinions about political correctness, or what might be termed political correctness? Is it just perhaps it's overdone consciousness, too much consciousness of words, euphemism?
Hideout.
It's another hideout? Interesting.
Well, look how fragile
and
they are.
when you're only talking in euphemisms, are you being clear about what you're talking about? I mean,
Do you have any idea what you're talking about?
well, exactly. You're too busy thinking about euphemisms.
Well, yeah, I think this is a problem.
How cool you are.
I don't have to think about that at all.
Well, true. Some of us are old.
No, I'm desperately uncool. No, I'm considered to be quite uncool. Don't worry, it's not a function of age. I'm an idiot. But the problem with, say, nonviolent language, right, is what does it do with the liar? What does it do with the manipulator? What does it do with somebody who's deliberately using language to deceive or to gain advantage in a cynical way?
So common.
It's extremely common.
Well, yeah, but that's another problem.
It's
That's
hard
like
to care.
that's like saying my transmission's going out. I'm going to change the spark plugs.
Or that's like your
But
mechanic
there are
saying
things, there are things that need to be done to cars. One is not exclusive of the other.
Think of the mechanic, though. The mechanic you go to, and the transmission's the problem, and he comes back and said, I changed the spark plugs, that'll be $2,700. And your rage, right, and anger is often, as Mia was pointing out, perception of injustice, right? Makes you angry. And when you're being lied to, and you know you're being lied to, it makes you angry. Well, this not taking the violence and aggression out of language, how does it allow you to identify the liar, to register your or the dissembler, to the person who's merely performing an opinion?
I think there's two different things. I think so. I think it's just, as I understand it, please call in if you're in the nonviolent communication world, because obviously we don't know anything about it.
Call in, I'll yell at
Or
you.
carefully violent.
663-8492.
Because as I understand it, as with political correctness, let's call it that, we're being conscious of the words that we use, and there are words that are just in common parlance. Fire away, Nonviolent communication people would say, don't use the word fire because that means shoot, and that's in your head, and that makes you, this is
ridiculous.
Hold on. That's how it goes. Is that too politically correct?
I have never heard somebody who said fire away actually shoot a gun at me or anything else. I mean, again, there's a level.
Fire the nuclear.
Fire the nuclear weapons. Anyway, no, I don't think that's real. But what I would say is this: you take, say, Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky deliberately speaks in a monotone, and he does this for a reason, right? And he talks about it. He said, "I don't like impassioned speech, and I just want to say these facts and make my argument to you." Actually, I'm doing little Chomsky hands here in the studio. You can't.
Chomsky hands.
And that's his position, and I understand it. But again, you see the people. You can watch him debate people on the internet as well, who just get infuriated with him because they can't respond to the argument. I still think, and we do have a call, I still think that there's a need in a culture to be able to call out the liar or the dissembler, and that if you take the aggression out of the culture and out of the language, then the liar has free reign.
Well,
can do whatever
it's
they want.
not non-angry language, it's non-violent communication. There's a difference there, I think. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please? Hello.
Hi there.
Hi.
This is Eleanor.
Eleanor Linus.
Hello. It's funny because I'm hearing it differently from my source of the radio than I am on the telephone, so I got to turn it down.
Yeah, you have to turn off the radio. Yes, that's right. La la la.
Eleanor from Bolinas. As my brother used to say, to Donna's delight, men are from Marshall, women are from Bolinas.
Hi.
Hey.
Eleanor, how are you?
Well, I couldn't help but call, so here's what
Excellent.
I want to share, and that is, I've read Don Miguel Ruiz, and his first agreement is be impeccable with your word. Now, that's beautiful. I really like that. So, and also I wanted to say, because it really makes a difference, that's why. And words are so interesting, and when you pay attention, you not only find out what you think, but it's just a surprise sometimes what comes out of your mouth. So having also looked into nonviolent communication and studied that, I have to say it's a very satisfying experience when, and it's, I'd say, listening is one of the big ones for our culture. We're not a culture that has learned how to listen. And that's very much a part of nonviolent communication, is being respectful and learning how to listen and reflecting back what you think the person is saying. That really is a wonderful experience to feel listened to.
So that you're actually drawing them in, showing them that you're listening to their point, even if you're talking against their point. At least you're listening to them. You're not just,
That's right.
to Mia's point, you're not just being negative. You're actually listening.
I wonder if children who are read to
actually listening and reflecting back other people's views can change your view. I mean, I'm often surprised how, when I learn more about where the other person is coming from, my view shifts.
Yeah. Well,
I think listening is amazing.
That's called learning.
Yeah, absolutely. But listening is an amazing quality people have it. Of course, I'm not untroubled by the quality of listening. But one of the most brilliant women I ever met, Anne Channing Porter, the painter, the poet. I could ask her a question. She was in her 90s at the time, and in the morning, and she would give me an answer in the evening. She had thought about what I had asked her for 12 hours. And
how rare.
Apparently you were asking the right questions. There's another side to that.
Well, but extremely rare, and but how deeply emotionally satisfying. I would agree with you. It is to actually be listened to. It happens very rarely in life, and when it does, it is an extraordinary experience.
Well, nonviolent communication is a forum where you can learn that, and it's well worth it. It really is. And as I get older, I find that listening and respect are the big ones that I am investing my consciousness into, and very worthwhile.
Well, Eleanor, I mean, a little bit of the problem with this, to me, is that ideas have taken on the quality of things. And so when you're saying, I disagree with your ideas, it's a little bit like making a kind of ad hominem attack against them, or saying you think that they're physically unattractive, or you don't like their clothes, or whatever. And so I find often even the idea of a discussion about ideas or a disagreement is received as a personal attack. It's received as
that's where nonviolent communication comes in. If you take the time to say, am I hearing, are you saying, is this what you're trying to say? And the person can convey, what it is that
feed it
they're
back to
trying
them
to
so they can
say.
listen to it.
And in the process of being listened to, there's a little opening that happens that allows them to hear you better.
Yeah. As MK just said.
Oh, you were saying?
You feed it back to them, and so they can actually hear what they've said.
Because you may get it wrong. You may not actually be hearing what they're saying in the way that they intended. And so if you give that some energy and time to really hear them out and listen, that's a different place to communicate from, and it's very satisfying.
There is, probably this will be received as nihilistic in this conversation on my part, but Schopenhauer had his essay, There's No Way to Win an Argument, but if you're going to engage one anyway, here are all the strategies you might try. The final strategy is to say to the other person, I'm so glad you've come around to seeing my point of view.
It's a joke, but when you truly respect another person and listen, then that totally changes the picture. It doesn't have to be a fight.
I'm an early childhood person for 50 years, And if a child comes to you crying, the best thing to say is, you're sad. You acknowledge what's going on, and then you can go from there and find out. Say, oh, no, don't cry. That doesn't do any good.
Well, you were making the point if a child is read to.
Yes. I wonder if children who are read to as children, which my children certainly were,
my mother
are better listeners as adults.
I would say my mother read me the Odyssey. Then we went on to the Aeneid.
I read my kids Gone with the Wind.
Well, there you go. And this is the difference between me and Amanda. But I don't know if it makes me a better listener. But my mother did read to me.
Yeah.
So for whatever it's worth.
I also want to say that some people like to fight. And
that's true. We are animals, after all.
Whatever you do, it may not. But still, if your intention is good and you're truly respectful, then that does change how things are unfolding.
Yeah, and again, all this we can all get along thing is just not true. I mean, you could take that to the suffragette movement and say, well, you're wealthy women. I mean, what are you so upset about? Life is nice. Why can't we all come to an agreement? We'll just sort this out. And they said, no, this is our demand. This is what we want. We're willing to fight for it. Would we like to live in a world where women can't vote? I mean, because this is where all this consensual, nonviolent, blah, blah, that's nice, but injustice or trying to change the world that you live in sometimes requires a struggle, and that means that you can't agree with everybody.
No, you can't agree with everybody. Of course not. How could that possibly be?
Or you have to actively disagree. Pardon me. You have to actively disagree with people. You have to say, no, that's wrong. And
in my opinion.
In my opinion. Well, see, this is the thing. I mean, that's what they would bring in. Women think they should have the right to vote, but that's like just their opinion. So,
And be ready to back it
up.
Well,
our culture has not instilled in us the respectful view of communicating very well. And so I don't think there's any danger of it taking over.
Well, there's just very little communication. We do this call-in show. I know lots of people listen to it are afraid to call in and have their voice heard. And I thank you, Eleanor, for joining us. But, I mean, that is a real problem, too. When do people actually take the time in their day to engage in these kinds of conversations, debate? The fact is it very, very rarely happens.
Well, it certainly happens at 11 o'clock on Thursday.
Thank you, Eleanor.
Having said my piece, and I wish you all well, and thank you for your program.
Wonderful. Thank you for calling in. That's great.
Thanks, you, Eleanor.
Yeah.
You're listening to Let's Talk here on KWMR, Point Reyes Station. We still have a few minutes. Time for another caller, 663-8492. Please join the conversation.
Please do join in. Well, political correctness.
I think it's very strange, to be honest, because to me it's all of this talking before you get to the talking. And Walter Ben Michaels is going to be on my radio show, which will be May 19th. He's going to join us. Wrote a book about 8 years ago called How We Learn to Love Diversity and Forget Inequality. And so this is how the New Left collapsed, essentially, too, because everyone had claims based on identity and said we need to be in charge. So the women said that they were more oppressed. They needed to lead the movement. And African Americans said, no, we're more oppressed. We need to lead this movement. And it was just this endless infighting that caused it to break down. But and in the meantime, the conditions, the working conditions of the vast majority of Americans and the material reality of their lives has gotten progressively worse for 50 years now.
And political correctness as a term is being used to drive that wedge even deeper, to blame the downfall of the middle class on somebody else. In this case, now it's immigrants, and tomorrow it'll be somebody else.
Well, I just think that it's true that, and I wouldn't. What reasonable person would deny that the experience of life in the United States and maybe every place, I don't know, for women is different than it is for men. For whites is different than it is for blacks or Hispanics, et cetera. All those things are true, but in trying to perfect the way that we talk to each other or talk about these issues, we've forgotten poverty, and we've forgotten these fundamental questions, and I think that's very destructive.
Caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please? We have about a minute, so
I've got 2 minutes.
This is autodidactic, and I believe that words conceal more than they reveal.
Can you explain that a little bit? Hello?
No.
Autodidactic. Are you still there? No. Words can conceal more than they reveal.
Well, sure, that's kind of a trivial truism. Thank you, Cole.
It's true. Language is shaded, shades of gray in every word.
Well,
except
this is a real problem, actually, that is caused by diversity, is that the terms that we use, do we mean the same things? I mean, do we even have the basis to converse with each other?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
This is, sad to say, a sort of dark secret of the social democracies of Europe that Americans certainly in places like Westmoreland, obsess over and say we should be like them. Those are extremely homogeneous cultures. Even with the last 50 years of post-colonial immigration to places like the United Kingdom, to France, even to places like Sweden, those are very, very culturally and politically, and the level of politics, homogeneous places. We don't deal with that.
Thank you both. Thank you, MK, for filling the empty seat. Wonderful to have
she
you
did
here.
more than that. Don't listen. He's a brute.
And
do you see how he speaks to women? His language is outrageous.
I'm offended.
Excellent. End the show on a high point. And thank you, whoever you are over there.
Paul Raphael, yes.
So this was Let's Talk. KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members.